September 2019, a Texas courtroom fell silent as the jury foreman stood to deliver a verdict that would shock a family, a town, and eventually the nation. After 4 weeks of testimony, meticulously captured on police body cameras, and nearly a month of evidence, the jury had deliberated for just 3 hours. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Sandra Louise Garner, not guilty." The courtroom erupted. Sandra's daughter Andrea collapsed in tears, whispering that these were the sweetest words she had ever heard in her life. Her defense attorney struggled to maintain composure, but across the room, John Garner's family sat frozen in disbelief, watching the woman they believed had murdered their loved one walk free. The evidence had seemed overwhelming. The murder weapon found hidden in her car exactly where her son Wesley had told police to look. Gunshot residue on her hands, internet searches detailing ways to kill someone in their sleep, and her presence as the only other person in the house when John Garner was shot 3 times while asleep beside her. And yet, 12 jurors saw enough doubt to acquit, leaving a community divided, a family shattered, and a murder officially unsolved. How could someone walk away from a case that appeared open and shut? That is the mystery we are about to unravel. This is the story of Kevin Garner, a devoted husband, a father, a businessman, and the shocking murder that changed the lives of everyone involved. Kevin Garner was born on November 1, 1975, in Waxahachie, Texas, and by the time he turned 42, he had built a life that reflected hard work, determination, and ambition. From his early career at Campbell Soup Company to nearly 2 decades at WPAC, a packaging company in Paris, Texas, and finally rising to general manager at DHL Motors, John's professional journey was a testament to perseverance and grit. Colleagues described him as decisive, blunt, and unafraid to make tough decisions, a man who would not hesitate to fire an underperforming employee or challenge anyone who fell short of expectations. Yet behind this confident exterior, John struggled privately with depression, relying on medication to manage his mental health. Friends and family knew him as a man of contradictions, outgoing and commanding in the office, yet introspective and vulnerable at home. He was a proud Texan with an impressive firearms collection, 49 pistols and around 12 rifles, but at home he was devoted to one person above all, his wife, Sandra. When Sandra was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2014, John's life transformed. He became not just a husband, but a full-time caregiver, managing her medications, finances, and day-to-day needs. Their home in Maple, Texas, a small town of just over 1,000 residents, became a place of care, devotion, and routine. Yet beneath the surface, the pressures of illness, family dynamics, and the weight of responsibility were quietly mounting, setting the stage for a tragedy that would shock everyone who knew him. Sandra Louise Garner entered John's life with a history of her own. 13 years his senior, twice divorced and working alongside him at WPAK, she was no stranger to independence or resilience. Despite the age difference, John pursued her relentlessly, determined to win her heart, until finally she agreed to marry him, sealing their union with a New Year's Eve wedding in Las Vegas. Their marriage brought together a blended family. Sandra's 2 adult children from previous marriages, Wesley and Andrea Miller, became part of John's world, creating a household where love, loyalty, and tension coexisted. On the surface, they appeared to be a typical happy family, yet underlying dynamics, generational gaps, step-parent relationships, and personal grievances would later become central to suspicion and speculation. Everything changed in 2014. When Sandra was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a progressive disease that would gradually strip her of independence. John, once husband and partner, became her full-time caregiver, managing medications, finances, household duties, and every detail of her day-to-day life. Friends described the couple as inseparable, John devoted to Sandra's care, and Sandra relying on his constant support. But as the years progressed, the weight of illness, dependence, and family responsibilities created a pressure cooker environment, a backdrop that made the events of December 2017 all the more shocking. The devoted husband and wife, once a picture of partnership, would soon become the center of a case that questioned loyalty, love, and the darkest possibilities of human behavior. On the night of December 29, 2017, shadows of suspicion quietly crept into the Garner household, leaving behind traces that would later dominate the investigation. Sandra's iPad, easily accessible without a password, recorded a series of chilling internet searches, How to Kill Somebody in Their Sleep, and 16 Ways to Kill Somebody and Not Get Caught. The timing of these searches was crucial, conducted late at night, just days before the fateful event, when her stepson Wesley Miller was at home and fully aware of the device's contents. Days later, additional searches appeared, this time on methods of suicide and ways to die, creating an unsettling pattern that investigators would later interpret as premeditation. The prosecution painted a picture of calculated intent, arguing these searches proved a meticulously planned murder, while the defense countered that Sandra, battling depression and the psychological effects of multiple sclerosis, could have been exploring dark thoughts about her own mortality. Arguments aside, the ominous timing set the stage for what would become a deadly New Year's weekend. On January 1st, 2018, John and Sandra Garner celebrated their 18th wedding anniversary at home, quietly marking the milestone with family, including Wesley, who visited and left around 7 p.m. The evening appeared ordinary, a typical celebration of love and continuity, yet the tranquility was deceptive. Hours later, in the early minutes of January the 2nd, a single gunshot, or rather 3, would end John Garner's life as he slept peacefully beside the woman who had shared nearly 2 decades of his life. What had begun as ordinary family routines and private online searches escalated into a nightmare that would not only take a life but fracture an entire family, leaving a trail of questions, suspicion, and legal intrigue that continues to haunt Maple, Texas to this day. At 12:45 a.m. on January 2nd, 2018, Sandra Garner placed a 911 call that would set in motion one of the most scrutinized murder investigations in Texas history. Her voice trembled as she described a terrifying scene. A masked intruder had allegedly entered the home, pointed a gun at her, and shot her husband 3 times while he slept, before demanding money from a lockbox and threatening to return if sirens were heard. She recounted a chilling conversation with the intruder, who supposedly said, "What I came here to do is done. I didn't come here to shoot you," leaving Sandra unharmed but shaken to her core. Yet, as officers arrived, several immediate inconsistencies arose that would later cast doubt on her account. The couple's multiple protective dogs had not barked, a strange anomaly, if a stranger had broken into the house in the dead of night. No forced entry was visible, and nothing appeared to have been stolen, despite the alleged demand for $14,000, leaving investigators questioning the feasibility of her story. Police Chief Boyd Norton, taking the lead on his first murder case, relied heavily on body cameras to capture the investigation, but even this modern documentation could not prevent critical errors. The crime scene was left unsecured, with first responders moving in and out freely, contaminating potential evidence. Photographs were taken on personal phones, some of which later disappeared and were never recovered. And forensic procedures, such as proper handling and bagging of gunshot residue, were mishandled, creating gaps that would later benefit the defense. Amidst these errors, small but crucial pieces of evidence were uncovered, particularly when Wesley Miller unexpectedly revealed the location of a firearm, a discovery that would dramatically shape the prosecution's case and thrust the blended family into the center of national attention. Just days after John Garner's death, Wesley Miller, Sandra's stepson, unexpectedly became the linchpin of the investigation. During questioning, Wesley revealed the location of a firearm hidden in Sandra's Ford Mustang, information that would soon become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Police returned on January 5, 2018, and after Sandra initially resisted, officers gained access to the car and discovered exactly what Wesley had described. A Taurus .38 revolver, wrapped in wet paper towels and stored beneath the driver's seat. Ballistics tests confirmed the weapon had fired the bullets that killed John, tying the murder to a gun that had once been a gift from John to Sandra years earlier. Investigators also noted traces of gunshot residue on Sandra's hands and arms, while her internet searches about killing someone in their sleep and avoiding detection appeared to establish premeditation. With her presence as the only other person in the house that night, law enforcement and prosecutors believed they had an airtight case. For 21 months, Sandra sat in Ellis County Jail awaiting trial, while her family, neighbors, and the small town of Maple, Texas, were left to grapple with shock, grief, and growing questions about loyalty and truth. From the outside, everything seemed clear. A murder weapon hidden, digital searches indicating intent, and forensic evidence pointing toward Sandra. To most observers, this was a bulletproof case. a rare example of justice ready to be served. Yet, as the trial would soon reveal, appearances can be deceiving, and in the world of criminal investigation, even the most damning evidence can be challenged, misinterpreted, or overshadowed by doubt, deception, and the complex dynamics of family betrayal. When the trial began in September 2019, the case that had seemed airtight suddenly became a courtroom battlefield, where every detail, every misstep, and every assumption would be scrutinized under the harsh light of justice. Defense attorney Thomas Pappas faced what appeared to be an overwhelming mountain of evidence. The murder weapon found exactly where Wesley Miller had indicated, gunshot residue on Sandra's arms, damning internet searches, and her presence in the home during the shooting. But Pappas had a strategy that would shake the prosecution to its core. He pointed a finger at Wesley, Sandra's own son, as an alternative suspect. The defense argued that Wesley had motive, anger over perceived favoritism, resentment, and the potential for inheritance from his stepfather's will. He had opportunity, being present in the home during the suspicious internet searches, and knowing exactly where Sandra kept the gun. And, most crucially, he had method, with the ability to plant the firearm to frame his mother, a step that would turn the investigation upside down. Body camera footage, initially intended to capture every investigative step, became the defense's most powerful ally. It exposed unsecured crime scenes, mishandled evidence, missing photographs, and procedural errors, highlighting a series of mistakes that weakened the prosecution's narrative. Under the defense's lens, what had once seemed a bulletproof case now looked flawed, uncertain, and filled with reasonable doubt. Jurors were presented not just with evidence of a murder, but with a story of family betrayal, investigative error, and the unsettling possibility that the person pointing the police toward the truth might also have been orchestrating a deadly deception. After 4 intense weeks of testimony, re-examined evidence, and emotionally charged arguments, the jury retired to deliberate in what many expected to be a straightforward decision. But the deliberation lasted just 3 hours, a remarkably short time for a case that had consumed weeks of court proceedings, forensic reports, and digital evidence. When the jury returned, the foreman's words echoed through the courtroom. "We find the defendant, Sandra Louise Garner, not guilty." The speed of the verdict suggested that jurors had quickly found reasonable doubt, swayed by the defense's compelling argument that Wesley Miller may have orchestrated the crime and manipulated the evidence to frame his mother. Across the courtroom, emotions clashed. Sandra's family wept in relief, celebrating what they believed was vindication after nearly 2 years of legal turmoil. In stark contrast, John Garner's family sat in stunned silence, hearts heavy, unable to comprehend how overwhelming evidence, gunshot residue, internet searches, and the murder weapon had not secured a conviction. Friends, neighbors, and the small town of Maple were equally divided, some praising the jury for following the law and protecting the innocent from wrongful conviction, while others questioned whether justice had truly been served. The verdict left wounds that would never fully heal, fractured family bonds, and a haunting question lingering over every life involved. Who had really killed Kevin Garner, and how could such a calculated crime appear unsolvable in the eyes of the law? Following the shocking verdict, Sandra Garner returned to the very home where her husband had been murdered, insisting she wanted to remain close to his memory. Yet her return did not signal reconciliation. Instead, it deepened fractures within both her own family and the extended Garner network. John's parents, unable to reconcile the acquittal with the loss of their son, moved away from their home directly across the street, leaving a void in the once close neighborhood. Sandra's extended family severed ties entirely, unwilling to maintain contact with a woman they believed responsible for John's death. The most bitter division, however, occurred within Sandra's immediate family. Her daughter Andrea publicly declared she no longer considered Wesley her brother, cutting off all communication and condemning him as a potential murderer in the public eye. Wesley, for his part, maintained his innocence, continuing relationships with John's extended family while remaining estranged from his mother and sister. The small town of Maple, Texas, watched in disbelief as a once close community fractured into camps of loyalty, suspicion, and debate. Conversations in churches, cafes, and homes revolved around speculation and conjecture, with neighbors weighing evidence, motivations, and character. The case that began as a tragic murder transformed into a social spectacle, highlighting how legal outcomes can ripple far beyond the courtroom, leaving lasting scars in families, relationships, and communities. In Maple, the question lingered in every household and whispered conversation. Who really pulled the trigger, and why had justice for so many slipped through their fingers? John Kevin Garner's death remains officially unsolved, a tragedy that continues to haunt Maple, Texas, and anyone who followed the case. Sandra Garner cannot be retried due to double jeopardy protections, while Wesley Miller was never charged, leaving the murder of a devoted husband, father, and community member shrouded in unanswered questions. The case exposes troubling gaps in small-town policing, mishandled crime scenes, missing photographs, unsecured evidence, and procedural errors that allowed doubt to flourish in a case that should have offered clarity and justice. Beyond the failures of law enforcement, the story also highlights the devastating effects of family dynamics pushed to the breaking point: mother against son, siblings divided, extended family fractured, and the way grief, suspicion, and betrayal can permanently alter relationships. For the people of Maple, and for those who have watched this case unfold across the nation, the lessons are stark. Truth is elusive when investigative mistakes cloud judgment, and justice can remain out of reach even in the face of seemingly damning evidence. Ultimately, John Garner became more than a victim of murder. He became a symbol of lost justice, a life ended too soon, and a family forever torn apart. Please don't forget John Kevin Garner. Remember the man who loved, who cared, and who was taken in the dead of night, leaving behind a story that challenges our understanding of truth, justice, and the fragile bonds of family.